Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
Reverend Wendy presents a talk that explores and expresses the truths of unity, and that there are real-world practical things that we can do to deepen our experience of spirituality and help us in our daily lives.
Some time ago, I want to say almost a year ago now, I was just doing some personal prayer and meditation work on our community and on our mission statement. And in the process of that meditation, what came to me were three very clear and very distinct short phrases that describe the how we do the what. And that's what I've been talking to you about this month. And those three statements that came to me is that how we do this is we are spiritually progressive. And that's what we explored and unpacked a bit more last Sunday. That we are socially responsive, which is what we're going to focus on today. And that we are radically inclusive. And that when we live from those three things, spiritually progressive, socially responsive, and radically inclusive, we will more than do our part in the second half of our mission statement of healing our world with love. It's not by accident at all that I placed these lessons the way that I did for the month of January. I always look forward to Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. And I very specifically said, this is the way I want to approach this month. When I think of Martin Luther King Jr., I think of many things, but one of the things I think of was his desire, his commitment, not only for civil rights, but for the establishment of the beloved community. Say that with me. The beloved community. Say that with a little more clarity and depth. The beloved community. Who in the world would push against that or not want that? The beloved community. And he gave some teachings and some vision on what that would look like, that poverty and hunger and homelessness would not be tolerated because international standards of human decency wouldn't allow it, that standards of human decency wouldn't allow it. It's not enough to legislate behavior. Certainly it takes us a step in the right direction, right? But if we only legislate, if we only say you legally must behave in this way, to me that's not nearly as transformative as us awakening the human heart, the global heart, and growing in consciousness where we would not think of acting in any other way. We wouldn't have to be told that legally we must act in a certain way. And he emphasized that the beloved community, to establish it, stood on two pillars. And those pillars are the pillars of economic and social justice. And I think that those two pillars are still every bit as necessary to work toward today as they ever were before. Jesus was absolutely socially responsive in the same way that Martin Luther King Jr. was and that others were, in that he was socially responsive to the issues present in his surroundings, present in his day. I don't know how we can call ourselves Christians or practical Christians or mystical Christians or followers of the way or people who understand something of what Jesus was about and step away from the need to be socially responsive. We must be socially responsive. I'm very grateful that Spirit gave me the words socially responsive. I like those a whole lot better than to be a social activist. Personally, I have a little bit of reaction to the word activist, because when I think of activism, I usually think of somebody coming from anger and somebody coming from me against you. Do any of the rest of you have a little bit of a response to that word? Maybe so. But to be socially responsive means that I look and I see and I feel and my heart is open and I wonder, what might I do? What might I do to help alleviate pain so that may all be happy, may all be blessed, may all be free of suffering? Well, what's my part in that? What can I do some way to be supportive of that? We're not alone by any means in New Thought in recognizing the need for us to grow up spiritually and step into finding our voices and our path and our way to be more socially engaged, to be more socially responsive, to work toward creating a more fair and just world for every single one of us. We're certainly not alone. There's a groundswell, I believe, of this awareness and this energy that we must commit ourselves to doing more than what we have done in the past. Still continuing to do our individual work, but not being satisfied to leave it there. To realize that if we really do care, that care must show up in some very specific ways, specific to the talents that we have as individuals, to the things that break our hearts open as individuals. It's not that we all step in and do the same work. It's that we are all willing to keep our hearts open and to recognize that there is work to be done. Would you not agree that there is work to be done? Boy, that's a very soft yes. I want to say, hell yes, there is work to be done. There is a lot of work to be done. I was doing a little more research again. I don't know why I do this. I write these many months in advance, and then I still love to poke around on Saturdays, and I say, what else can I add? What else can I weave in here? And I found a couple of organizations that I knew about, but I had forgotten about. And one is Thich Nhat Hanh's Engaged Buddhism movement. And I love the phrase, engaged Buddhism. That's really what we're talking about here in metaphysics as well, saying engaged spirituality. It's not enough just to take all the classes and know all the great things that Ernest Holmes taught or Charles Fillmore taught or Mary Baker Eddy or any of our particular lineage. It's not enough just to know all that stuff and become a licensed unity teacher or a minister or a practitioner. It can't end there. It can't end there. We've got to be engaged with our spirituality, with our spiritual practice. And so engaged Buddhism is a part of this effort as well. It refers to Buddhists who are seeking ways to apply the insights from meditation practice and Dharma teachings to situations of social, political, environmental, and economic suffering and injustice. That's a pretty big homework list, would you not say? And coming out of meditation, coming out of clarity of consciousness, coming out of deep-seated compassion. Another is the organization called the Network of Spiritual Progressives. Have any of you heard of this? The Network of Spiritual Progressives? Check it out. It is part of the Tikkun teaching and movement, and Tikkun is a Jewish movement. And the Network of Spiritual Progressives, I'm going to take some time to read some of what they're about. And as I do, I want you to kind of check in with yourself and ask yourself if this doesn't strike a chord of resonance for you as well. So the Network of Spiritual Progressives describes spiritual activism this way. Now, I still prefer my word being spiritually responsive, but they use the word spiritual activism. A spiritual activist is one who is a courageous warrior of love. Isn't that a beautiful picture? A courageous warrior of love. Being a spiritual activist means working to create a loving, just, sacred, and sustainable world through means that are also loving, just, sacred, and sustainable. That's really important. Through means that are loving, just, sacred, and sustainable. A spiritual activist practices empathy in word and deed as a way to build beloved communities. Beloved communities. And then they go on, I'm going to share this, to describe what they mean by loving, just, sacred, and sustainable. By loving, we mean that we love one another and ourselves, even if we don't always like others. Love is a verb, not simply a feeling. A spiritual activist practices love in action. We do often think of love as something that we receive. Love is an activity. It is a state of being, a way of expressing. They define or describe by just, we mean a world where all forms of inequality and dehumanization are overcome not only through the necessary legal and political challenges, but also, and more importantly, through consciousness raising and the transformation of people's hearts and minds. I think that is key. Through consciousness raising and the transformation of people's hearts and minds. That's what happens when we are about transforming our lives. We are committed to growing and expanding in consciousness, to transforming our minds, to clearing our perceptions, to opening our hearts, and letting our actions, our socially engaged, our socially responsive actions, come out of that. By sacred, we mean seeing the inherent beauty, awe, wonder, and radical amazement of the universe and the planet, and enhancing our capacity to appreciate the sacred and to feel our sense of interconnectedness with the universe. Isn't that beautiful? And then finally, by sustainable, we mean living in a world in which all human activity is ecologically sensitive, such that the world functions in a way that ensures the longevity and well-being of the life support system of the planet and its inhabitants through just economic, social, and political systems. Can I have an amen to that? Yes, and you can clap for that. I think we need to remind ourselves of the importance of our own deep inner work and using our own deep inner work to be about what is our work to do in the world. Where and how are we to be socially responsive? Where and how are we to be socially engaged? I don't ever think it should come from the front of the room from someone like me or anybody else saying this is what you need to do. But I do think what needs to come from the front of the room sometimes, and what we need to be reminded of, is the overarching responsibility that we have to continue to grow in consciousness and to remain engaged in those issues that speak to us. Do you think there's a shortage of issues that are problematic today? Do you think there's enough that we could each kind of pick and choose the ones that we are most passionate about? Do you kind of think so? I do. Are you grateful that some people are drawn to some issues at the exclusion maybe of others? And you might look at them and go, oh, that one just doesn't kind of hit me. But this one over here I really care about. We all have work to do, and we are all perfectly designed for the work that is ours to do. We are perfectly designed for that work by the very virtue and fact of the life experiences, the good ones and the bad ones that we have had, that have cracked our minds open and cracked our hearts open. The Association for Global New Thought, which has been in existence now since 1997, I've been a part of it since 1998 and on the board of it since 1999. And by the fact that I have been so deeply involved in it, I've been involved in it because your support and involvement here has leveraged me to bring what I know into that field. The Association for Global New Thought is working and has been working to bring together all of our New Thought communities and help us as communities feel bolder in stepping into finding our place and our voices in this kind of work. And in the last few months, we have been deeply involved in actually creating a curriculum called Social Uplift Ministries that is about providing materials to churches just like ours that say, we care, we want to be involved, and we don't necessarily know what to do. And then what we've done here in San Diego, even before AGNT started doing the some material, is we've been pulling together our New Thought churches in San Diego through an organization or an effort I've started called Bolder Together. And we come together as communities, equally as spiritual leaders, saying, all right, how do we as spiritual leaders, how do we as New Thought congregations help to do our part, our small part? But if all of us do our small part really well, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. So this idea of being socially responsive, I want to share with you some of the pieces I think that are necessary for us to be socially responsive. We need to know what the issues are, number one. And we need to not just identify the issues in sound bites. These issues, whatever the issues are that we're talking about, whether it's the widening gap between the rich and the poor, whether it's racial injustice, whether it's economic injustice, whether it's climate change or violence on the world, or all of these issues, it's not enough just to know kind of the sound bites of them. We need to be willing to invest a little bit of our time and effort to learn about them. We don't have to learn about all of them, but whatever one or two that really speak to us, to be willing to go a little bit deeper and not just know what they are, but to study them and understand them better. We need to be informed, and that means taking some time and effort. I know that in my personal calling into the work of racism, that it has been sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes difficult for me to realize how much I didn't know, and to not go to a place of guilt for the fact that I didn't know it. I didn't know it because I didn't need to know it at the time. But I do know it now. And now that I know some of the things that I know that I didn't know before, I believe, morally and ethically and spiritually obligated to live differently and to work toward what I can do as an individual and as a leader of our community around this particular issue. Sometimes when we educate ourselves about whatever the issue is, it can feel kind of sad and heavy. It can feel pretty difficult and big. But it's not until we're willing to put ourselves in a place of getting a little uncomfortable with some of that we can begin to collectively find our way through it. Because these are not simple problems with simple answers. They are complex problems with some complex answers. But you know what? I think we're pretty smart. I think if we want to do it, we can do it. Do you believe that? If we want to do it, we can do it. But we've got to be willing to roll up our sleeves and do some of the work. And we need to do it from a spiritual practice. We need to do it from a spiritual practice. I would feel so disappointed if I were successful in inspiring all of you to become more socially engaged, but then you did it as an angry activist. I'd feel like, no, we got to bring a different consciousness to it. We have to bring a different consciousness to it. We have to bring a consciousness to it that engages our true heart, where we really can look at the other without demonizing the other. I've got to tell you that one of the things I'm very appreciative of is what's been happening in our living room conversations as we have gathered together our community and provided opportunities for our community to be in dialogue around a variety of potentially charged topics like immigration, like gun responsibility, like racism, some pretty heavy topics. And as we have sat together and listened to one another and shared out of our personal and individual experiences, what I'm so proud of is the little stories I'm hearing of how those in our community who can be politically on completely opposite ends of the spectrum are choosing to be educated and better informed by whoever's on the other end of the political spectrum from them. Is that not powerful? Does that not take guts to do that? It does. So we can't, no matter where we are personally on these kinds of issues, if we dig in our heels and take sides and demonize the other, we're never going to get to a peaceful solution. We're never going to get to a peaceful solution. There is another way. Martin Luther King Jr. pointed us to some of the pieces of that other way. One of my favorite statements of his is this one: "You have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt." I'm going to repeat that because think about that for a moment. You have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. So I want to bring us back to where I started us, to bring us back to what we stand for here in the Unity Center. We stand for that mission statement. We stand for transforming lives, our individual lives, through classes and teaching and coaching and all of those kinds of things. But we will never say that that part is enough. We will always say it must include this part as well. It must include doing what we can do individually and collectively as a community to healing our world. Namaste.
Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.